play this hand. You see, before March of 2020, which was, a decade ago now, I went to my local library to get the book scans of the previous books I've looked at on this show. But the library's been closed since March, so today I'm going to be looking at Fanfictions, since I can just get screen caps of that off my computer. Good news though, as of filming, my library is open again, but by appointment only, so now I just have to overcome my fear of talking to people on the phone. I don't know, maybe I can find a workaround?
Hey Mom, can you call the library for me and make an appointment?
What? No, do it yourself.
Oh, fine.
And yes, I did film this one part here just for an optimal view of my shirt.
I was gonna look at fanfiction eventually anyway on this show, but I wanted to look at more media tie-in novels before doing that, even though those are basically fanfiction in and of themselves. They just got the clearance with the license owners to publish it. But real fanfiction is a whole different ballgame. Nothing is off limits, continuity or even logic be damned. You want to write your own episode of Big Bang Theory like my dad did once? Hell with it, can't be worse than the actual show. You sick of waiting for George R.R. Martin to buckle down and finish A Song of Fire and Ice? Do it yourself. Do you want to have the Winchester brothers from Supernatural solve a case with the Scooby Gang? Well, they kinda did that already, but nothing's stopping you from making a follow-up. Maybe you could throw Harry Dresden into the mix, make a Scooby-Doo Supernatural Dresden Files 3-way crossover. Yeah, that sounds awesome actually, maybe I'll write that. Point is, anything is possible with fanfiction. Well, today I'm going to look specifically at Final Fantasy VII fanfiction. Nothing to do with the remake that came out recently, which is basically its own continuity. Maybe? I just don't want to confuse things. Or myself. But the original Final Fantasy VII is one of my favorite games, and is probably the most fanfictionable in the whole series.
I'll definitely look at fanfiction for other entries in the series down the line. Oh dear God, am I going to have to buy a Final Fantasy 13 shirt? But for now, let's look at Final Fantasy VII fanfiction.
Thematically, what-ifs are probably the coolest concept for fanfiction. Anyone else who writes knows that just one little change can affect the entire course of how a story goes. This fanfiction, simply called What If, seeks to answer questions like what if Cloud hadn't fallen before when the reactor blew up, the scene in the game where Cloud falls through the roof of the church and meets Aerith. Well, if he never meets Aerith again, that could be a drastically different story for FF7. Let's read. Shinra's machine exploded, blowing a hole in the catwalk. As the smoke cleared, the three stared at each other. It's okay, go on. I'll find my own way back, Cloud calls out. Alright, Cloud, we'll see you back at the bar, Tifa calls back. Just don't go getting your spiky head taken off, Barrett adds. The three run from the reactor, Tifa and Barrett one way, Cloud the other. Cloud knew he had to find his way back. Climbing down into the slums, he reached the bottom, passing an old rundown church. He formulated a game plan. He figured that he would go to the Sector 5 slums and see what to do from there. As he passed the church, he noticed a girl was inside. She seems familiar. Where have I seen her before? Oh yeah, she was the drunk I passed after the first reactor. I love this little nod to the clearly wrong option when you first meet Aerith. He continued on to Sector 5. After Sector 5, he continued on through 6, but was attacked from behind by a wild animal. He died and nobody found him.
Well, that was anticlimactic.
Later, assuming Shinra had captured him, Avalanche attacked the Shinra headquarters. They were wiped out. As they were dead, nobody was around when Sephiroth attacked the headquarters, and a week later, the meteor collided with the planet. When the planet gathered the life force needed to fix itself, Sephiroth was absorbed, and like he predicted, he became more than a god, going on a rampage, leaving behind a path of destruction. That was it. That was the whole thing, unabridged. Or rather, that was the first chapter. There are 3 others looking at different what-if scenarios. Chapter 2 ponders, what if Cloud would have saved Aerith? Entering the room, they noticed her right away. Cloud then couldn't stop himself. He drew his sword and approached Aerith. He then slowly raised the sword over his head and just managed to stop himself from splitting her skull. Then something caught his eye. Sephiroth. He was plummeting down, Masamune in his hands. It was aimed straight at Aerith. Cloud screamed. Grabbing Aerith, he threw her away, safely out of the way. returning his attention to Sephiroth, but not soon enough to defend himself. The Masamune blade pierced Cloud through his chest. Tears welled up in his eyes as he felt the pain. It burned, he noted. His eyes began to close as his life slipped away.
I'm sensing a theme here.
After the burial, the rest of the group continued the journey to stop Sephiroth, unfortunately without their strongest ally. Sephiroth easily overpowered them, and succeeded in his plan to merge with the planet. Am I expecting too much out of this? I don't know, it just seems like somebody has it out for Cloud. I guess you could say the author harbors a lot of strife over this character. Let's just look at the next chapter. What if Zack had defeated Sephiroth at the Nibble Reactor? Sephiroth, what have you done? How could you? Zack yelled. Quickly he drew his Buster Sword and charged Sephiroth. Sephiroth easily blocked the attack and countered with one of his own. The attack hit Zack, sending him flying from the room. Sephiroth followed him closely. Not giving him an opening, he landed another blow, this one sending him into a bunch of pipes. Zack hit a valve, causing compressed Mako to shoot into Sephiroth's face. Taking the opening, Zack swung his sword, taking Sephiroth's head clean off. He then heard a sob. Looking in the direction, he saw his friend Cloud, one of the Shinra guards, at the guide's side. Tifa! Tifa! Cloud sobbed. The girl gave no response. Cloud lifted her into his arms. Tifa! The next day, Zack was the Shinra representative at the mass funeral for all the now deceased townspeople. He knew that Shinra would eventually cover up this day. It was only a matter of time before they came for him. He went to the inn and grabbed the comatose Cloud. He escaped into the mountains. Once across the mountains, he went into a town called simply Rocket Town. It was to be the site of the first manned space exploration next year. A young woman, Shira, took in him and Cloud. After a few days, Cloud woke up. The next day, they left for Midgar. Zack knew it was dangerous, but he had to see Eris. The rest of the story goes as it should have until Cloud goes into the coma after Meteor is summoned. Ultimately, Sephiroth manages to merge with the planet.
So basically, Cloud dies. Again.
We only have one more chapter, let's finish this up. What if Kadaj never got Genova's head? Yeah, we're diving into spin-off territory, but my only rule was no remake content.
This is all too fun, sir. Any requests for the next act?
Kadaj asked. Rufus stood from his chair, removing his cloak. Kadaj saw the parcel in his hand.
Mother! He exclaimed.
A good son would have known, Rufus taunted, and then threw the parcel off the building they were on.
No! Kadaj yelled,
casting fire at Rufus, who fell to the side, pulling his weapon. The spell hit the wall, causing an explosion.
Mother!
Kadaj called, diving from the building, trying to catch the parcel. Kadaj fell quickly, his slender build making him more aerodynamic than Rufus, who shot at him on the way down. Kadaj watched in terror as one of the stray shots went past him, striking the parcel, opening it. Then he watched in horror as the parcel hit the ground, splattering his mother's head all over. Kadaj landed, not noticing the net that had caught Rufus. He approached the remains just as his two brothers did. Yazoo was in tears. Don't cry, Yazoo, Laz comforted him. This struck a nerve in Kadaj.
Don't cry? Don't cry! What the hell do you mean, don't cry? Kadaj ranted. Don't you know what this means? Our reunion is finished! Done! I don't know what to do!
Kadaj fell to his knees, placing his hands on the biggest mass remaining. He was upset that he didn't feel the presence behind him. Give up, Cloud told him. Kadaj stood up, turning to him. What a ridiculous idea, he thought. No, surrender was not an option. He attacked Cloud. Cloud defended himself well. He deflected the attack and landed one of his own. This knocked Kadaj down. Cloud finished the job, burying his sword deep in Kadaj's chest. Seeing this, Laz and Yazoo fled. The threat was over. Cloud went back to his normal life, but died 3 months later, ill with geostigma.
Well, I don't know what I expected.
Eventually, scientists found a cure using the life stream. Humanity would survive, but the savior was forgotten.
These aren't what-ifs. This is Cloud in a point-and-click adventure game from the 90s, making all the wrong choices and getting himself killed. Cloud doesn't even have to be there and he dies anyway. Color me disappointed with this one.
Meet Me in Midgar is another what-if of sorts that sees an original character named Fiona intervening with the most spoiled video game death in history and stops Sephiroth from shish-kebabbing Eris. She has loose connections with Shinra, being the sister of Rufus Shinra, with whom she has a very Game of Thrones relationship. Oh wait, no, they're step-siblings, so that makes it okay.
Yeah, I bet you think furries are okay too, huh, you goddamn heathens?
Yeah, I'm king-shaming, I don't give a shit. The story is honestly a bit slow to pick up, but it's written well enough to keep one engaged, and the last few chapters, which I won't spoil, hit like, well, not a ton of bricks, but like a single well-aimed football to the nuts. If the premise sounds interesting enough to you, it's probably worth checking out. Just scroll past the step-sibling incest stuff, it adds nothing to the story anyway. Next up is Public Access Nibelheim. Final Fantasy meets UHF? Don't mind if I do.
Never before in the history of motion pictures has there been a presence so commanding, so powerful, so deadly. He's Sephiroth, the Librarian.
Can you tell me where I can find a book on materia?
Don't you know the Dewey Decimal System, Cloud? Sephiroth, the Librarian.
Sorry, these books are a little overdue.
Sephiroth, the Librarian. Tonight, only on U62.
As you can probably deduce from the title, if you're old enough to know what the hell public access television is, the characters of Final Fantasy VII run a low-budget DIY television station, and there's some great comedy setups in this. Sephiroth has a storytime reading show with bratty children in attendance. Rufus Shinra hosts a game show where he, without prior knowledge, is giving away part of the Shinra fortune. Vincent Valentine, despite being the most soft-spoken of the group, is given his own late-night talk show. Sadly, the setups are more often than not better than the executions, and I think it has a lot to do with the format these vignettes are written. I know this sounds petty, but the humor would probably come across better if this was written in a script format. This sounds like something that should be dialogue heavy, but there's so much fluff in between lines that the snappiness gets lost. The humor is also a bit juvenile sometimes, which I really don't usually mind, but you can only make so many jokes about Reno's rod before the novelty wears thin.
Get it? Rod also means penis.
But humor's subjective and all that. Nothing here is quite up to the caliber of Wheel of Fish or Raoul's Wild Kingdom, but you might get a kick out of this if you keep your expectations low. So, I originally wanted this video uploaded around Christmas. Glad to see that worked out. But let's look at a Final Fantasy VII Christmas Carol anyway. Of course, it's another retelling of the Charles Dickens classic. It ain't Muppets Christmas Carol, so why bother, I hear you ask. To which I say, fair point. This version doesn't have toe-tapping musical numbers or Rizzo the Rat, but rather than just telling the story with the Final Fantasy VII cast filling roles like stage actors, it's set in the Final Fantasy VII universe and follows the story beats of A Christmas Carol, but manages to tell a different story. And this story manages to pull a twist ending. Yeah, out of A Christmas Carol. But I'm not gonna spoil it, it's actually pulled off really well. It's a holly jolly good time. Seeing as I love Beauty and the Beast so much, I'd be remiss to leave out this crossover, The Pilot and the Beast, which is pretty much a straightforward retelling of Beauty and the Beast with the Final Fantasy VII cast stepping in to play the roles of the Disney classic. This fanfiction is maybe a little too self-aware, but what saves this one is some of the hilarious recasting, which I kinda don't want to spoil. Okay, I'll spoil a few. My favorite is Barrett playing Mrs. Potts, and the titular characters are Sid and Vincent. Oh yeah, this was leading to something interesting, shall we say. And it never happens. Disappointingly, The Pilot and the Beast is incomplete and hasn't been updated in 15 years. But I don't know, maybe the author will get back to it. eventually. That was actually a really big hurdle in making this episode, actually finding fanfics that were properly completed. Come on, people, you're as bad as me with finishing projects that you start. Let's look at a crossover that's actually finished, though. Silver Mercury, which combines Final Fantasy VII Advent Children and Star Wars. Darth Vader lands on the outskirts of Midgar in search of an apparently Force-adept Sephiroth on the orders of Emperor Palpatine during the events of Advent Children, and, well, it just goes from there. But it's not just a simple, let's throw characters in one universe into this other universe and see how it turns out thing, though. The author makes it feel like one cohesive universe, likening Mako as a source of Force energy, which is such a simple idea, but when you think about it, it makes so much sense for something like this. Couple that with a Timothy Zahn-like understanding of both the Star Wars and Final Fantasy characters that adds a layer of depth to them not as readily portrayed on the screen, and this is actually a really fun, really engaging fanfiction. Also in Timothy Zahn fashion, a few original characters are tossed into the mix that neither overshadow the rest of the established cast or fade too far back into the background to the point of feeling unnecessary or tacked on. Some Final Fantasy VII characters who got shafted in Advent Children are even actually given something to do in this. Cid has a whole dogfighting subplot at Fort Condor, Vincent battles it out with Boba Fett, who's been sent to capture the members of Avalanche, because why the hell not? The author is clearly a huge fan of both Final Fantasy VII and Star Wars, and it shows in the writing, with tons of nods and deep-cut references to both series, including Star Wars Expanded Universe characters showing up, like Thrawn and Zizor. It actually ends on kind of a cliffhanger, with Emperor Palpatine and Darth Vader leaving the Cloud-Sephiroth fight, thinking Cloud's been defeated, making one less nuisance to get in the way of their galaxy-controlling plans. You'd think the guy who was left for dead by his teacher on an active volcano planet would be the first to make sure that Cloud was actually dead before he left, but I digress. The Empire's influence looms over the planet, which has been renamed New Korriban by Emperor Palpatine. None other than Wedge Antilles walks into the Seventh Heaven Bar looking to see if the members of Avalanche want to join the Rebel Alliance. Hey, we knew a guy named Wedge, that's super weird. A follow-up to this was actually started, combining Star Wars with the events of Dirge of Cerberus, but sadly only the first chapter was ever posted. Shame, I'd love to see where that went. To wrap this up, I just want to say something I think is important. I don't want people to think that the jokes I make at the expense of some of these fanfictions are meant in spite or to take the authors down a peg or anything like that. I genuinely hope that these authors are still writing and have improved at their craft, because that's the only way they're going to get better, is to keep writing. I actually hope the author of Silver Mercury has found paid writing work, because holy crap would that be wasted talent. And to anyone watching this now, if you have an idea that you want to get out there, write. Don't worry about your work being found by some dickhole on YouTube with less than 1,000 subscribers 15 years down the line and mocked. What kind of jackass would do that anyway, huh? Sure, maybe from the conceptualization stages of this episode, I thought there'd be some easy pot shots at some bottom-of-the-barrel stuff. But even with the lesser stuff, there's a passion about the Final Fantasy franchise that can't be denied. And just seeing that passionate play is what keeps me drawn to the franchise, even with some of the middling entries of the last decade or two. I don't like 10. I am prepared for your hate. So please, keep writing fanfictions. I need more material for the show. I want to thank you all for watching. I will look at more fanfiction in the future, not just from Final Fantasy, but hopefully other franchises as well. But next time, I'm going to overcome my fear of talking to people on the phone and get to the library so we can hit the books again with Guardians of the Galaxy, Rocket Raccoon and Groot Steal the Galaxy. I gotta find a way to shorten that title for the video.